So, good evening. My name is Barb Jennes. I'm the current Poet Laureate of Ridgefield, and it's such a pleasure to be here this evening for the first of a series of poetry readings titled A Garden of Verse. I mean, look around. These readings are one of the many poetry projects I have planned to help achieve my goal of encouraging Ridgefield residents to read, write, listen to, and enjoy more poetry. I also teach poetry workshops at Ridgefield Library and at the Aldrich Museum, and will be working with Ridgefield Theater Barn after their expansion is complete to conduct poetry workshops for young people. And for those of you who might remember, I'm a retired 8th grade English teacher from here in town. First of all, I want to thank the amazing staff of our hosting venue, the Keeler Tavern Museum and History Center, including Executive Director Hildegard Grab, and Mary Ann Connors, who is the Director of Private Events and Rentals, Katie Burton, the Head of Communications, and also Roger Keeler, Caretaker, who also writes poetry, by the way. You'll notice that there's a donation jar on the book table at the back. We encourage you to make a donation to Keeler Tavern this evening. There are also brochures outlining the many wonderful programs that the museum has in store, and then also membership brochures if you care to join. You can't ask for a more beautiful venue for a summer poetry reading, and we'll have several additional Garden of Verse readings coming up in the months to come. Right here next week, same time, poets Marilyn Nelson and Frederick Douglass Knowles II, two powerful BIPOC poets, will be reading in an event co-sponsored by Ridgefield Allies, a community organization taking steps to struggle for racial justice locally. And there are flyers, by the way, on the back table about next week's event. And then after an August hiatus, we'll be back for 4 other Tuesday evening readings in September, to include a breast cancer awareness evening on September 7th with 2 amazing poets, Nicole Callahan and Kyle Potvin, both breast cancer survivors themselves. And then the final event on September 28th will feature Connecticut State Poet Laureate Margaret Gibson, reading from her new collection, so new it's not even out until August, The Glass Orb. Just a few housekeeping notes, which I don't think I'm going to need, and upcoming events. Due to COVID restrictions, there are no public restroom facilities available on site tonight. If you need assistance, let me know and I can guide you to the nearest facilities. Please remember to take your personal items with you. And there's also a sign-up sheet on the book table for those who'd like to receive advance notice of other poetry events here in Ridgefield, and then also help yourself to a Read More Poems sticker on your way out. And you're also invited to like Ridgefield Poet Laureate on Facebook for all kinds of poetry-related events and information. The poets will have copies of their books available after the event. Wonderful poet Karen Silk has offered to use the purchases as a donation toward Keeler Museum. So thank you, Karen. And without further brouhaha, let me introduce our first poet. The Poet Laureate of Washington, Connecticut, Karen Silk has been a psychotherapist, a teacher, and a businesswoman. She is currently a broker with Sotheby's International Realty and serves as the director of the Washington Environmental Council. Karen has studied with Vijay Sheshadri, I'm sorry if I pronounce these names wrong, Kevin Pilkington, and the late Aha Saeed Ali, among others. And her collection, Somewhere a Bird, was published in 2012. So please welcome, if you would, Karen Silk.
Thank you. It is a beautiful spot, very inspiring. And thank you all for coming. And Barb, thank you so much for organizing this. What a treat. One of my daughters, who's a writer, when I told her I was coming here, she said, "Mom, don't talk too much and read not too slowly." She said, that's my advice to you, so I'm going to try and follow it. Gift. When your lover kisses your mouth, become a gift to passion. Pass on your smile, the fortune you've made, a basket filled with apples. Light candles at dusk for the dead. Lift moss from the dank earth to make a bed in the thicket for the red fox. Praise how the river flows, how the moon rises in late November, just at sunset. Laud mysteries keeping you from sleep. As dawn purples the hills, feel the day rush into your arms. Love like that. Let it come. The uncovered sun. I give it into your hands as I might give the North Star, or the now blooming gardenia, or the music which casts its spell as we walk, green and eager, into the scent of the newly cut hayfield and sun. There is so much world, fragrance, and sound. I carry you with me, love, into it. The long sky offers the journey. Bells reach into the light. The uncovered sun building a melody wild and slant. The late afternoon of tea leaves glowing. Take the flame. I've always been fiddling around with writing, but 25 years ago, my young husband was playing on the tennis court, and the next day he was diagnosed with leukemia, and he lived for 7 months, almost to the day. And at the end of that journey with him, I would come home at night and wonder how I was going to live through it. And drinking became rather appealing. And I thought, this is not the journey I want to take. And so I sat myself down and I decided that I would come home every night and write instead. And so this is really the result of that journey, which truly began 25 years ago. The south of France. Suddenly before us a riotous field of sunflowers, vast and voluptuous. Ascending flowers, descending sky, light, everywhere light. Dazzling summer morning, the south of France, Najac it was. We walked into that flamboyant field, a festival of yellow flags. At lunch, gladness, sweet figs, and wine. Did the village bell sound, or a thin shadow steal across the path of stones, then wait, hidden and still, for us to pass? So, on another note, maybe we've all been deserted by someone that we felt very interested in. And this is a poem which celebrates that event. It's called Teetering. Last summer I cracked open a perfect split at the buffet table in pursuit of wild mushroom ragout, brilliant green sugar snap peas, tiny lettuce tossed with goat cheese and balsamic. Haven't we met, was your opener, your Ipana smile disembodied in the twilight garden. 5 months you kept my interest with tickets, reservations, bright ideas, and kisses. And then one night, without warning, you closed the gate. It is the nature of gates to clang, to rattle, as they settle to silence. And now, in my Dolce & Gabbana blue butterfly dress, 3-inch manolas with yellow feathers and pearls, when I walk baby birds in flight, I watch you, Martini Man, 100 miles across the terrace. You turn, raise eyebrows, the high sign, white teeth against a tennis tan I could easily smash. Instead, I plant an air kiss near your ear and wonder if I look beautiful, even as I sway into your pale gray silk suit, then back against the jamb of the open French door. I got a lot of angst out of my system by writing that poem.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so this was a poem that I wrote on Inauguration Day this year, January 20, 2021. Snow, a veil of sugar falls, white, everywhere white. Hope comes in small bursts, as in the east the winter sun rises. How many miracles have you seen in your lifetime? This day, the wind, its body is laced with mercy. I awake with a long, dry thirst for goodness, for a shining attention, for the possibility of grace. So let's go back to the book. How am I doing on the sound? I can't. Okay.
We can hear you.
You can. Okay.
Razor? Yeah, maybe a little closer.
Oh, okay. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is called Without Which. Grief recalibrates the heart. The way a stone spills into a canyon changes forever the run of the river. The way a harp string vibrates, then is stopped by the hand seconds after the final note sounds, still, silent as dust through the sword of sunlight. So the poet Marie Howe lost her beautiful brother Johnny, as I'm sure many of you know. And Marie is a friend, and she has a poem that was very dear to my heart. And the poem is about visiting Johnny's grave and walking through the snow. And it's dynamite. And this poem was inspired by that poem. And it's called Not Once. 5 years on the hill beneath the 100-year-old copper beech, you have watched days rise above your slender grave. Difficult to believe you are contained in airless space. You who filled rooms with laughter and ideas, restless for the world and for me. 7 or 8 times I have lain where you rest, faced stars, the dark sky teeming, alien and vast. Not once have I been brave enough to turn and lie face down against the grass. I don't know if any of you know Lake Warramog, up in Washington and Kent and, Warren. And having grown up in the Midwest, I learned to skate on ponds that were in the middle of fields. And so I often find myself skating on that lake. And this is called Skater. Black ice blown in from Alaska covers the lake as swiftly I move from the shore. I hear ice crack as I skate toward open water where birds rest in congregation, toward ice fishermen's still benediction, and across the lake, houses shuttered and still, whispering winter, iced gardens where last summer I stood drinking wine, trying on laughter in my little black dress, toward hills holding up the bleak bones of trees, the rolled up for winter town beach, the slack sun haunting the sky, toward a room where I can wait for sleep, a white room clean and spare, filled with silence, finally, yes, finished with sorrow. And then again. Most mornings I awake with courage, which usually vanishes by noon. Then the high sun obliterates all shadow and the winds have died. The village horn sounds lonesome, remnant of the rural life. Afternoon settles still over the land, the lake, and me, as I thumb through a throng of possibilities which tomorrow I may take seriously. As the day begins its burn into evening, I again feel as brave as the warriors who once owned these hills, as bold as the red tail that swoops down for its prey. And then again, I know the boat will be there, its nets in fine repair, oars in well-oiled oarlocks, the water calm as I journey out. This is called Tonight. As fire is tamped by damp dune grass, it is my heart that cries enough. Afterwards, spent hours of no apparent consequence, except I am alive. Tonight I will ride a wave, gain a larger perspective. I am not the roaming surf in search of one more cove or cave or river mouth. I am makeshift, which means small, fragile, mist above a field or ocean, that which is rising. Tonight I will ride a wave. Imagining happiness. Say it is spare and light, a room open to the sea and birds and islands snow-ringed, floating between water and gray-washed air, streaked with backlit blue just under the eyelid of sky. Say it is lined with books, pictures, paintings, this room open to gathering as I pick up glass and shells splayed upon the sand. Say there is no room, only the dream of a room this rain-soaked night, as I walk along the still street above the headstrong shore, house windows flooded. So, in California, after the war, on the peninsula, there was something called the Blossom Train. And you could get on this train in Palo Alto and go all the way to Santa Clara. And this was through all the magnificent orchards, which are now gone. And this is a poem about the Blossom Train. It was a Sunday in June, Palo Alto to Santa Clara, the train, again after the war, a place of jubilation as families boarded for the Blossom Tour. Acre upon acre, clouds of blossoms, almond, orange, apple, pear, and plum. Windows flung open, hands outstretched to catch the petals floating in the breeze, and oh, the fragrance. Halfway, the train stopped. Picnic tables scattered in the park. Sandwiches were unwrapped, and the delectable newly picked fruit was offered for sale. We ran into the orchard, jumped to touch the low-hanging boughs. It was a world of white and pink, of splashing light, exuberant and delicious. Year by year, the orchards dwindled, the fragrant air filled with dust. What had been was gone forever, except now and then, in a garden, in Sunnyvale or Mountain View, a tiny volunteer pushes through the earth. A seed long dormant springs to life. A thrill, this regeneration, this thrum of nature, this remnant of another world, this testament. So how am I doing on time?
You're fine. Give us a couple more at least, please.
Okay, all right. I've got a couple more. So as I said earlier, I grew up in the Midwest, and the Midwest has many characteristics. The first one is it's pretty damn flat. And then the second is that most of the towns in the Midwest have trains running through them. And the town that I lived in was no different. So this is a little ode to my Midwestern roots. The streets, it's called Flight Pattern. The streets were straight, no ribbon down the middle. When cars hugged curbs, only one could pass. Every house had a noble backyard, ending at an alley where hollyhocks grew, and the ragman shouted from his horse-drawn cart words we called gypsy. Sunday afternoons, tiny planes buzzed low above oaks and elms, headed for the field across the state line in Illinois. Mostly, we listened for the whistle of trains speeding south to Indianapolis and New Albany, or north with coal mined in Kentucky. The slow snake of the river remembered Indians who once camped and built canoes, replaced now by houses, radiant gardens, and the lone crabapple in the vacant field where we sat high in branches on hot summer mornings, wanting the 10 o'clock zephyr out of Chicago to flatten pennies we'd placed carefully on the tracks. Screen doors slammed, mothers called, a song drifted from a radio or piano. Sun shone into windows masquerading as mirrors. We waited like little birds hidden in the leaves for some signal to fly. And I'm not quite sure how this happened, but years ago when I started reading, I ended with this poem. And it just felt so good as sort of the end note. And so ever since then, you'll know when it's almost over because I'll be reading this poem. And it's called And Now This Morning. This is our world, as exotic and graceful as the dragonfly who lives with dignity completely itself. And now this morning, geese press south, giving voice to their journey. They are never finished. May that be our fate, all of us never finished. Another season of Thanksgiving, the hills above the lake, dazzling as heaven. I admire each dawn, high noon, and sunset above these waters as our ancestors did, keeping faith with the evening star and every bird and all the grasses and every fish and every shining tree. Thank you.
Isn't it fun? I know. When we're outdoors and we're live.
You want me to change cards before?
Yeah, did you say you wanted to?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Karen. That was wonderful. Wonderful to hear your work. Our next poet, Aaron Caycedo-Kimura, is a writer and a visual artist. He is the author of 2 poetry collections, Abasute, which won the 2020 Slappering Hollow Press Chapbook Competition, and the full-length collection Common Grace, forthcoming from Beacon Press in fall of 2022. His honors include a Robert Pinsky Global Fellowship in Poetry, a St. Botolph Club Foundation Emerging Artist Award in Literature, and a Best New Poets Anthology nomination. The bird is trying to beat us all for poems tonight. I love it. His poetry has appeared in Beloit Poetry Journal, Poet Lore, DMQ Review, Tool Review, Louisiana Literature, The Night Heron Barks, and elsewhere. Aaron earned his MFA in creative writing from Boston University and is also the author and illustrator of Text, Don't Call, an illustrated guide to the introverted life. So please welcome Aaron.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Barb, thank you so much. Thanks for having me here tonight to read some poems. And Karen, thank you so much for your poems. That was wonderful and so beautifully read. And thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight to hear us read. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. If I lean into the mic a little more? Right here?
That's great.
Okay. Yeah, I have a very soft voice. I'm so glad you have a microphone here, because without this, you wouldn't be able to hear me. I'm going to be reading 10 poems for you tonight from my new chapbook, which is called Ubasute. This chapbook is about my parents. It touches off on their experiences of World War II, of being newlyweds, of becoming parents, settling in suburbia, and finally growing old and dying. It covers a lot of ground. My father passed away 10 years ago, 2011, and my mother passed away in 2015. And I wrote these poems as a way to keep them alive in my life and as a way to continue honoring them. The title Ubasute is a Japanese word which literally means abandoned, and it refers to a mythical practice from Japanese folklore where a grown son lifts his aged mother on his back, carries her to a mountain, and abandons her, leaves her to die. I was a little boy when my mother told me this horrible tale, and this is the subject matter of the first poem I'm going to read for you. It's actually the first poem in the book. It's a very short poem, and it's an ekphrastic poem inspired by a woodblock print by the master Tsukioka Yoshitoshi. And the title of the print and the title of my poem is The Moon of Ubasute. The Moon of Ubasute, after the woodblock by Tsukioka Yoshitoshi. Years from now, when I am old, blind, and crippled, his mother said, you must carry me up the slope of Tanigawa, past the ancient knotted pine, leave me in a cradle of hakone grass and moss. Without pity, my son, the moon will watch as I reach for my mother, Okasan, Okasan. The ginkgos will bow, weep their leaves, bury me in gold. My next poem is a pantoum, and it's entitled Burial. I returned my father's body to the earth, cremated as he instructed in a letter. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. Those who needed to know were told. I had his remains cremated as he instructed, scattered his ashes in Bodega Bay. Those who needed to know were told that I waited until my mother passed to scatter his ashes in Bodega Bay, past the jetty where we used to fish. I waited until my mother passed, poured out their dust together, past the jetty where we used to fish, from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. I poured out their dust together with a handful of Uncle George, From the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. With a handful of Uncle George, I return their bodies to the earth. So it's true. My father wrote my sister and me a letter saying that he didn't want a funeral, didn't want a memorial service, didn't want to even have an obituary in the newspaper. My dad was a very quiet man, and I think he just wanted to go quietly. And 4 years later, when my mother passed away, she asked the same thing of us. So we obeyed honored their wishes. But something about that bothered me. I mean, who in future generations would ever know they existed if there wasn't any online obituary? So what I did was I got to work and I started writing these poems with the intention of getting them published. So on one hand, I could be the dutiful son who honors his parents' wishes, but on the other hand, I could make it known that they did indeed exist and had such an impact on my life. My next poem is about my father. In this poem, I refer to Executive Order 9066, and many of you already remember that that's the executive order that Franklin Roosevelt signed into action, which led to the incarceration of many Japanese Americans during World War II. I also probably should mention, I use a word in this poem that I didn't know before I wrote this poem. It's the word gnomon, Gnomon. You all know what a sundial is, right? Many people, I don't know if there's one here in the gardens, but many people have a decorative sundial in their garden. But the gnomon is that needle that stands upright on a sundial. So when the sun crosses the sky, it casts a shadow off the needle, and you could tell time. This poem is entitled Hand Tilling. He chuffs his shovel into soil with the sole of his right boot, more dried mud than leather. He balances full weight, both feet on the shoulders of the shovel. Gloved hands rocking the handle, blade prying pat clay. He levers a clod, turns it, hacks it, repeats down an 8-foot row to his right. The smell of earth takes him back to San Gabriel, the family farm of rented acreage, before the war, before Executive Order 9066, eviction, incarceration. After tilling 4 beds, he plants the shovel upright, like a gnomon, marking time, rests on the pine bench under the pin oak. He takes a swig from a can of Coors, surveys his garden, never needs to look beyond his fence. My next poem is based on probably my earliest memory. My mother told me that I was only 1.5 when this happened, but I distinctly remember this. This poem is entitled Watching Grass Grow. Maudie and I lie on our bellies, tiny fists under tiny chins, staring at a rectangle of dirt outlined by pine stakes and kite string. Dad has planted grass seed off the side of the driveway. Says if we're patient, watch closely, we'll see it grow. Maudie whispers, "I don't see anything." Expecting some magic, I yell, "It's moving!" But it's just an ant crawling over boulders of soil. We get up, dust ourselves off, go inside to watch cartoons. After April rain and sun, we have a front lawn, backyard too. Tricycles, swing set, swimming pool, and bedrooms of our own. As we get older, we wonder at how Dad is so content with a tracked home, his glacier blue station wagon, a small plot of land he waters and grooms year after year. His family owned only what they could carry to Jerome and Tule Lake. He never mentioned that. The only grass he saw at the Santa Anita Assembly Center was in the middle of the racetrack near the horse stalls where his family slept. In that last poem, I mentioned Jerome and Tule Lake. Those are the two internment camps my father and his family spent their years during World War II in. And the Santa Anita Assembly Center is actually the Santa Anita racetrack where they gathered all the Japanese Americans in that area before they sent them out to different parts of the country. This next poem is also about my father, and it's entitled Ritual. He drags a razor down his cheek, traces a pattern, 19 strokes, scrapes cream and stubble from drooping skin, like shoveling snow off uneven pavement. Sunk in his recliner, he conserves movement, pauses while sculpting chin, labors oxygen from bedroom air. Early 1940s, he got through teen years in Jerome and Tule Lake, learned to shave, smoke, and cuss. In camp, every other word was a swear word, he told me. I heard him say damn only once. He also quit smoking, finally, in '72, after inhaling 2 packs a day for 30 years. Shaving cream, face towel on the side table, basin of hot water in his lap. As ritual second, I hold the mirror. Keep from saying, good enough. After ghosting a touch-up, he exchanges track 2 for towel, refits the cannula under his nose. Oncologist at 3, car ride home, final look at his garden through the kitchen screen door. This next poem is about my parents when they first got married before my sister and I came along. And it's entitled The Hardest Part. The fire truck siren downstairs raided the air of my mother's dreams. She'd scream in her sleep, my father told me, even after we married. More than a decade past the Second World War. For him, American concentration camps. For her, the firebombing of Tokyo. They moved into a San Francisco apartment that rented to Japs. A 1-bedroom walk-up above the Post Street fire station. They painted their bathroom black. It was in style then. Shelved books, unboxed a new rice cooker, watered a shrub of Japanese maple, potted for their future garden. When the station got a call in the middle of the night, the rumble of the overhead door crumbled into the wreck that was once her home. Swirling lights flashed ancient trees into the swirling lights flashed ancient trees into flames through the thin silk curtains of her eyelids. No warning, no drill, no cover. My father stilled her body, his broad hand on her shoulder or hip, as they lay in the dark listening to the slowing of her breath. The hardest part of those nights, he said, was waiting, sometimes hours, for the truck and the men to come back. What's kept alive? She crunches her walker into the sea of pebbles surrounding the stepping stones, tells me, "This bush with flowers is Japanese. That one is too, but different." I hover close behind, ready with an outstretched arm, as if to give a blessing. "Pick that large weed near the lantern, by the roots, and throw it into the pail." My father planned and planted this garden 50 years ago, hidden behind the fence of their Santa Rosa tract home. But he's gone now. She hires a hand to rake leaves, prune branches once a month. Soon, she'll be gone. I'll sell the house, return to Connecticut. A stranger will buy it, become caretaker of the garden, but won't know that from their San Francisco apartment, my father transported the Japanese maple, cradled in a small clay pot, the momiji now guarding the north corner, and that my mother chided him for bothering with a dying shrub. I have 3 more poems for you. And this next poem, the title of the next poem is my mother's name. Her name was Hama. It's a Japanese name, and it's spelled H-A-M-A. I ease a pen into the curl of Mom's hand. Ask her to sign a check. She sits on the edge of her bed, barely lucid, slowly forms H, A, a faint blue ballpoint cursive, a ripple, an echo, H, A, again, her hand can't write what comes next. Her name is Japanese for beach. I say, "It's okay." Help her lie back, wonder as her eyes close if her memory washes ashore somewhere. Goat Rock, Doran Park, bright and blustery, where with bare feet, pant legs rolled up, she watches I don't toddle too far into the surf. Apologies for blowing into the microphone, but I have a mosquito right up here, and I'm like, My next poem is about my father, and it's entitled Memorial. Straight as steel, hands on hips, Dad balances like a hood ornament on Irving Washington's head. Irv stands feet shoulder width apart, arms stretched out wide. A towel turban cushions his scalp. On the San Francisco Marina Green, some bathers pay no attention to the 2 college gymnasts in tight swim trunks. The black and white image is attached to an email Irv sent this morning. He says he lost contact after my parents married 60 years ago, would like to reconnect. He doesn't know he's 7 years too late. No online obit, found me through my website. He calls my father remarkable, a word I never heard used to describe him. But yes, look, there he is, poised in the air, the husband who never cheated, the father who never struck me. Before I read my last poem, Barb, thank you once again for inviting me here, and thank you everybody for coming out to hear us read. My last poem is entitled Afternoon Infusion. She panics 3 hellos, as if startled by the noise of an empty house. Calls from St. Joseph's. The nurses are slow to start her hydration. I'm at a bar. Stevie Nicks reverbs in my beer. lures me back to the edge of 17 in this town I left 30 years ago. I take her call outside, stand away from the smokers. Half truth, I'm at the mall. She slurs a request. Milk of magnesia. And that other thing she can't remember. But I remember. When I was a boy, she told me about the mythical Japanese custom, ubasute. A grown son lifts his aged mother on his back, delivers her to a mountain, leaves her to die. I'll come pick you up after chemo, I say, and hang up, realizing she's already cradled by the mountain. The waft of cigarette smoke and hint of manure in Santa Rosa air usher me back into the restaurant. The hostess smiles, welcomes me, clueless. I have come and gone. Thank you.
Wow, how wonderful to have poets back in person and gardens that we can all enjoy together. So thank you everyone for coming. This was just a really magical night, and I hope you'll join us again for other readings in the series. And again, just thank you for coming. Have a great evening. Wow. Thank you, Chuck, for taping.
Let's see what we got.
Hey.